Good evening, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of From Dial Square to Where, another Mesut Island Disc special. And today we've got, following Andrew Mangan the other week, we've got another podfather on today, Elliot Smith from the Arsenal Vision podcast. How are you, Elliot?
Hi, I'm good. How are you? Thanks for having me on, Andrew.
Hi, very welcome. I'm very well, thank you. And delighted to have you back on. Thank you ever so much for your time.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we've also got Rohan Virdi, sometime YouTuber himself from the AFTV International Gooners. How are you, Rohan?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on, Andy.
You're very welcome indeed. And you've been on before, so yeah, it's great to have you both back on as well. Now, we're going to press on with the episode today. Everyone get involved on the comments, and we can pick up those comments as and when they come in. But Mesut Island Discs, we've had a few episodes of it now. And obviously take on the you two guests probably don't know the old British institution that is Desert Island Discs, but you may have listened to the well publicised Ian Wright version of it fairly recently. I don't know whether either of you did.
I have not had a chance to do that yet. I have to admit that things have been super hectic here, but it's on the list.
Yeah, you should definitely listen to it. It's available as a podcast on all the usual platforms, but it's you're dead inside if you don't get a bit emotional listening to it, I think. But highly recommended. We're going to move on to the first take on Mesut Island Disc, and that is an Arsenal goal that you'd be quite happy to take to the desert island with you and watch over and over again, because you'll never get tired of it. I'll go to you first, Elliot, on this one.
Okay.
Which is your choice?
Which is my choice for which category again? Sorry, are we just starting at the top?
Arsenal goal. The Arsenal goal.
Arsenal goal.
Happy to watch. Yeah.
So this is tough, right? Because I guess the question is it a great goal or is it a meaningful goal?
Yeah, meaningful to you, maybe. Something special to you that you'll never get tired of, maybe.
So I have to admit that I'm partial to Thierry Henry scoring at the Bernabeu against Real Madrid. During that run to the final, that's definitely one that's going to stick with me. So, but it's aesthetically, it's certainly not a goal you just say I just want to watch it over and over again. As silly as it sounds, I'm also partial to the Arshavin goal against Barcelona in the first leg against them in the Champions League. I don't know why it just sort of felt like a big moment for that era, even though it was really just halftime of the tie, and a tie that we went on to lose. Certainly there's the Jack Wilshere Norwich goal just for its aesthetic beauty. So I might pick one of those, but I think ultimately I'm going to go with Fabregas in Italy, the long range shot, sort of announcing himself. And I'm a huge Cesc Fabregas fan. You can hate me for it, but that's a goal that for me, for a player that I wound up really endearing, who was endeared to me greatly. I would say that is ultimately the goal that I would probably pick because of the connection I had with the player. But I've managed to spread out my choice enough that I've covered a lot of bases so that I can be criticized from all angles, but hopefully covered all my bases as well.
There's going to be a lot of Olivier Giroud, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah, tons of Giroud goals. The Scorpion goal for sure. Not the Scorpion goal. The goal the next game where he did the Scorpion celebration when we were trying to win the game, but instead he held everybody back. Yeah, that's definitely the one right there. Yeah.
and the Jack Wilshere Norwich goal, of course, it's all about the Olivier Giroud flicks that was involved in that as well. That's what really made that goal.
That's what made it. Loved it for that. Yep.
No, honestly, I can't deny your choice at all. It was a fantastic goal and a fantastic player, and I'm not of the sort of persuasion of people. Let me rephrase that. I don't understand the people that don't appreciate and still hold a bit of Cesc in their heart. To be perfectly honest, he did so much for the club, and yes, he left, but it was our fault we didn't get him back. It wasn't his fault. Nothing to do with him. So people that don't like Cesc, I don't get that personally.
Yeah. And he just did the Arscast. So, I mean, for that reason alone, he's a legend in my mind.
That was a great interview, actually, wasn't it?
It was, wasn't
candid.
it? Yeah. Candid.
Candid, yeah.
Yeah, that was a great interview. And, it somehow feels that he's definitely chosen his camp out of Arsenal, Barcelona, Chelsea, and he's chosen that Arsenal is the place that he gets most loved. And that's why he's clearly sort of positioned himself as an Arsenal fan and as an Arsenal legend, and which is why he's sort of trying to win people back, which is a good effort from my perspective. I had some feelings about him leaving, and the reason why he gave, in fact, on that Ars blog interview that he was doing, and the fact that he left maybe a couple of years earlier than what he would have liked to. Whatever feelings I do have about that, but I have no qualms of him going to Chelsea because we didn't sign him, so his preferred destination was here.
I think that was our fault as well. We didn't strengthen the team around him. He was left to do everything pretty much on his own, wasn't he? Really, at that point, he was the star, and we didn't supplement that with anyone else. I don't think we've got anyone to blame but ourselves. Rohan, what's your choice of goal?
Yeah, and talking about Olivier Giroud, right? Like, if he has a montage that he shows his grandchildren, he'll probably be ranked higher than Messi, right? Like, with the number of goals that he scored, he could easily fool someone in the future that he was the best footballer in history, right? And one more thing that I feel right now, which is relevant, is that what's come to the fore is how important fans are to the game, right? Last weekend we saw the Bundesliga without any fans, and when you don't have the atmosphere, you don't have the drive, then the players also seem a little detached from the game, and it isn't like really that intense. So for that intensity, the goal that I like and the commentary that follows with it is the one that Thierry Henry scores against Liverpool when we won 4-2. He goes around Carragher, and the commentary is what makes it even better. He picks it up from the halfway line, he goes in there, and the commentary goes like sidestepping one, sidestepping two, and then he scores that. But that's not my favorite goal. My favorite goal is Jack Wilshere versus Norwich. That is, everybody praises Pep Guardiola for what he's done now, but Arsenal were really doing it for much longer with crappier players. And I'm not saying that Jack Wilshere is one of them. He's one of the good ones. But Jack Wilshere, Santi, and then Olivier Giroud, what a goal it was. Left everyone standing. And then for years, I've shown it to my friends and family who don't follow football or don't follow Arsenal, and I've shown them this goal as to, if you want to watch football and you want to see how beautiful it can be, this is like 2 minutes of football that you have to see, and everybody has just been left stunned, So that's my favorite goal of all time.
It's hard to beat, isn't it, really? And there's a very good, talking about interviews like we did with Cesc Fabregas, there's a great interview recently with Jack Wilshere as well. There's on the, which one is it? What's it? The recent Arsenal podcast, I believe. And that was really good as well. 2-part interview. What a shame. I mean, talking about that Barcelona game, Elliot, he just completely bossed that midfield, didn't he?
Certainly for half of it at least. And I used to blog, and I haven't in quite a while because I'm a lazy shit. But there was a time when I wrote a sort of fantasy fan fiction blog when Jack had just burst on the scene, and it was 10 years from now. It was supposed to be a blog from the future about all his Ballon d'Ors and why he was the best midfielder in the world, and the Champions Leagues that he had won for us. And it was sort of projecting the career that I anticipated him having. And I think at that time, there wasn't a lot of negative feedback to that blog. I certainly wasn't ruthlessly ridiculed for it. So I think that just kind of shows you what the expectations for him were. And it'd be one thing to fall short of those expectations, because any young player can fail to live up to best midfielder in the world status, but the extent to which his career never even really got started is the disappointment there.
It's a crying shame. We've been the victims of that with far too many players, in my opinion, with Eduardo and just a name, but a couple.
Well, Diaby's another one that comes to mind. Yeah,
Diaby's a massive one. Let's move on to the next category, and I'll go back to you again, Elliot, with this one. And in the same vein, it's not a goal, it's a game, an actual whole game that means a lot to you, that you would take with you to the desert island and to be able to watch over and over again. Which
Yeah.
one have you chosen?
Gosh, this is really tough. I mean, some of these questions are tough because it's like, why are you taking the game, right? Like, I mean, are you taking it because it's just a fun watch? Are you taking it because it really meant something? I mean,
Your
I
choice.
think
What I try to convey is for me anyway, and it's up to everyone. Everyone's different. That's why the program is interesting. The show's interesting because everyone's got different reasons for different games. And like for example, Arsblog, he chose the 1979 Cup final because it meant a lot to him personally, and it was when he started following the Arsenal. And it sort of links to a part in his life, you know. It means something because of the time of life it actually happened. So, but in other ways, it can be just a spectacular match to watch that you just were thrilled by. So it's completely down to your own opinion, really, Elliot.
yeah. So, I mean, because obviously, like the Hull FA Cup final, like meant a lot. Because of breaking the drought and the way it ended, and the Ramsey goal in extra time was really exciting. I think the problem is obviously you can go back to famous ones from further back. I mean, you could say Thomas charging through the midfield to win the title against Liverpool. I mean, I was not an Arsenal fan at that time, so yeah, that'd be a great game. It's not necessarily one that I connect with on a personal level, but for the club, it's extremely meaningful. There's the game I referenced in Italy that I think was great. There's the win over Barcelona that I referenced already. There were a couple 4-2s against Spurs. Certainly the 92nd derby or whatever it was, where Cesc scores right from the restart. That was a fun one that I would choose. And so it's really hard for me because I have a lot of games along the way that stand out as fun. I think it's a lot easier to pick the games I wouldn't choose, because there are ones that the pain. Yeah, well, that's the thing. The painful ones really stick in the memory very clearly, and the good ones sort of blend together. I mean, I think just for pure fun, you could choose the 7-5 against Reading in the Carling Cup. That was a crazy game. I remember losing my mind on Twitter at halftime and then having to delete a lot of tweets. Although I don't delete tweets, so they're still out there for you to view. I mean, ultimately, it's tough, but I might take that win at the Bernabeu. I don't know why, but that game just really stands out for me as a moment where I felt like our club was arriving on a level that would put us at the absolute very top table of European football. And I'm not sure. Did that happen? I can't remember. Did we arrive at the very top table of European football? It's possible.
It felt like it, didn't it? That was a good. I mean, I remember when I was I got my membership pack through the season after, and they included the DVD of that game because it was just so special. What a moment it was, and it made everyone sit up and take notice and really take it seriously, didn't it? For even if it was only for a short while, it was there. We no one had ever won at the Bernabeu from an English team before. So,
and what a team it was that time.
Yeah. Say again. Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
What a team it was. The Madrid team.
It was incredible.
It was unthinkable.
I know. Same as the Barcelona team. Full strength Barcelona team we beat that night as well. It's it brings back so many good memories, and it's like even the Champions League final, and a few people have put it into the next category that we'll come on to shortly. But for me, I was so proud of the team that night, and I wouldn't want to get rid of it because there are some good, even despite the result, there's some very, very nice memories from that game for me personally. And the Sol Campbell goal, when that went in, I don't think I've ever felt as exhilarated over a football game before. And I wouldn't want to get rid of that feeling because I can still remember it. So, Eddie, what's your choice of game, Rohan?
So, there are two games that stand out, right? Like Elliot said, right? We've had patches of games where we've played really well and we've played beautiful football, and so I started supporting Arsenal in 2003. Like, that's when I got introduced to Arsenal, and then the rivalry between Arsenal and Manchester. That was the best time to be introduced, but unfortunately that was the last time that we won the league. So but just seeing the rivalry between Arsenal and Manchester United, and in some ways Arsenal was the underdog, right? It was the story of the underdog there, although we were the second best, so we were not the underdog for 18 other teams. But with Manchester United, it was that sort of a race where it was neck and neck, and then just seeing the way the team progressed. So from then I could choose, games that we played, and we played some beautiful games after that. But what stands out the most for me are two games. One is that Barcelona game, which is the Jack Wilshere game, because that was prime Barcelona, right? Like that was Xavi, Iniesta, everyone in that midfield, and then you have Jack Wilshere, our guy, bossing that midfield, and us winning it, and the Emirates absolutely exploding. So the feeling there was great, and that is amplified because later years, when I was at university, I would organize these watch parties at my house. We'd have projectors, and for a lot of round of 16 games with Bayern Munich, I made the mistake of having that watch party at my house, and then we'd start with all the enthusiasm, and about 20 minutes in, Toni Kroos has scored, and like everyone else has scored, and you're just like watching a dismal game, right? So for the performance, I think it's the Barcelona game. But what the feeling that I got of joy, but more than that, the relief, was the Hull final, because I remember watching it, and a couple of days before that, I was talking to my friends who were Manchester United fans or Chelsea fans, and they've been like bantering me, and I said, just wait for this Sunday when we win against Hull, and then 8 minutes in, we're 2 goals down, and I'm just like, it's happened again, hasn't it? Like, I'm not answering calls, I'm getting calls, and then we turn it around, right? Like, and that was just, and on Instagram, there's like a photo of me with my TV and Arsene Wenger, like in the TV. So that's a selfie with me.
It's awesome.
And my TV. But it just felt so good. It was so massive for our club. And then, that was a game that I won't forget. So yeah, that one.
I mean, I still love the FA Cup, and it means a lot. So people in my generation, anyway. I mean, going back to when I was a kid, and it lasted the whole day until, an hour or two after the final whistle. It was all about the FA Cup that day, and they used to interview local butchers in the morning of one of the clubs, and they'd named a certain sausage after the club, or that type of thing, and it was just incredible, all stupid little things like that, and. Celebrity fans of those clubs, and it went on all morning and right the way through to kickoff, and it meant something back then. And I can't remember who it was. One of the players was interviewed recently. It escapes me which one, but they said at the time it was bigger than the Champions League, the FA Cup final. It meant more, and it was shown to more people around the world. And it's a shame it's not the same anymore, but. It's still got that magic for me, and that was an exhilarating game again, and the way that we turned it. I mean, Santi Cazorla's free kick, what a phenomenal free kick that was! It was incredible, wasn't it? So yeah, great choice. And the next one is, I'll go back to you again, Elliot. Mm-hmm. A game that you would like to get rid of, banish from history. There's been quite a few choices down the road with Arsenal. Something you could change the result of. And which one would be your number one?
So it's funny, right? Like the one that you think would be the easy choice is Paris, right? The Champions League final. And that was painful. And certainly like the pain of that game, I would like to erase. In terms of a game that I would just want to wipe from my memory because of the frustration of it, I think it'd be the 4-4 at Newcastle. I don't know that I have ever been as frustrated by and hurt by a game, not in terms of the ramifications of it, but just everything it represented about Arsenal in that moment. Because what people kind of forget is that, like, we were sort of in a title race at that point. Like, had we won that, we're 4-0 up at halftime. We're looking like we're playing great. We're good. We're potentially making a charge towards the title. And then everything went wrong. We had a sending off, which wound up hurting us, obviously, right? And like, it's Joey Barton, and the team was just full of see you next Tuesdays, and like the way we collapsed, and it also involved refereeing nonsense. So like, I mean, I could pick one, like the Rooney dive at Old Trafford that cost us the unbeaten streak, or Paris, or whatever you want to say. But for me, that is a game that, for whatever the reason, 50 years from now, I'll be able to say it's one of my least favorite Arsenal games. So I just delete that one.
Yeah. Again, I can't really argue too much with that. I mean, there's a lot of the end of last season some of my lowest points of being an Arsenal fan under Unai Emery. The collapse at the end of last season.
Oh yeah, Palace maybe.
Yeah, exactly. I could choose any one of those games, but I actually wouldn't, because it might mean that we would have made Champions League and he might still be here. So, in lots of ways, I mean, less said, the better. Rohan, what's your choice of game that you'd like to delete and change?
So Emery, for some reason, I've just deleted him from my memory.
Smart man.
Like, it seems like it's like
I've been seeing my specialist, but I haven't got there yet. My psychiatrist hasn't worked his magic yet.
For some reason, when I was thinking about it as well, and like you said, this was the lowest point of me being an Arsenal fan for 17, 18 years now. But somehow I just didn't remember that, because I was like, that's not Arsenal. That's something else. They're playing under the name, but that is not my team. That is not my club, right? Like, these are imposters.
I totally agree. That's how I felt. I felt like it wasn't my club.
Yeah, and that's what I was telling some people, that this is the first time that I felt, that it's a chore to watch Arsenal. Tuning in every week was a chore at that point. You would still do it because you're just so tuned to it, and at some point, at some level, you had that feeling that maybe it's going to change and we're going to do better or something like that, but it just didn't get better. So I mean, I'm not even counting that. And of course, if I could change the result, then it would be the Champions League final. But I've listened to a few of your podcasts before, and the people who have come on here have made a brilliant point that game also had Sol Campbell's goal, like you said, right? Which was a high that I had not felt before in terms of being an Arsenal fan, right? Like, that itself brought so much joy that taking that away, if I could change the result, then yeah, I would definitely do that. But, I wouldn't want to delete that game completely. But the one that I would like to delete is the 8-2. The 8-2 against Manchester United. Because, like I said, a lot of my friends, a lot of people in India are Manchester United fans, and I had like my friends all around, and it was embarrassing. It was frustrating. And that seriously, I think it had some PTSD on me. Like, Arsenal needs to pay for therapy or something, for big games against Manchester United, especially for the next years. Whenever I went in, of course, I'd put on a brave face, but every time I'd just be thinking, don't get smashed again. Please don't get smashed again. That's the feeling that I had after that. And we did get smashed a couple of times, not by Manchester United, but by Chelsea and by City or someone else. But, that one. And again, like, I hold Wenger in such high regard. And, I still think that he is an Arsenal legend. There is no doubt about it. But I think there are multiple factors that led to his downfall, and he was stubborn, but that's not the end of it. But that sort of signified the end of the feud between him and Ferguson, really, right? Like, after that, they sort of became friendly, right? And Ferguson, when he became friendly with people, it signified that he didn't see them as rivals. And that is what Arsene Wenger became after that game. So, for me, it was painful.
The funny thing, I'll just add that, like, that's a stain on the club. But weirdly, it's not as painful for me as like the 6-0 to Chelsea or the game right before that where we got annihilated. By the way, Ron, I have that exact mug like in eye shot. I can like see it right there. But because going into that game, it kind of felt inevitable. Like we had left the squad in such bad shape. I think the trolley dash came after that, if I remember correctly. And like we had like Armand Traore playing left back, I think, and Ignacy Mikel playing center back at some point in that game. I think like it was a bad team that was not prepared to go to Old Trafford, and everything went wrong on that day. And Ashley Young just had shots flying in, and everything that kicked went in goal. But like, I will remember that game in part for things like the "We Love You, Arsenal, We Do" song going on nonstop for basically the entire second half. Like there were things that I was proud of in that day and the way the fans reacted, and it did feel a little inevitable. So while it was a stain on the club, in a way, it wasn't as painful as some of the shocks that we suffered, along the way subsequently or prior to that, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
No, that does.
Sorry, go on, Ron. Sorry.
That absolutely does, and the passion of the fans, and especially the away fans, has always been applauded, right? And the way it was, and you wouldn't expect that team to go and win at Old Trafford, but losing by the odd goal, losing by a couple of goals, it would have been acceptable, right? Like it was a combination of a lot of things. We missed a penalty at the end of the first half, which would have sort of got us back to 2-1, 3-2, something like that, 3-1. And then, everything that they tried was going in for them, right? Rooney scored 2 of those free kicks. Ashley Young turned into like prime Robin or something,
just on the other foot.
Ribery actually. So it was just frustrating to watch that. And yeah, I mean, for the PTSD that follows, because every time I saw it, every time I saw the fixture list, I was just like, don't get smashed again.
Yeah, I think it broke Arsene Wenger a little bit as well somehow. So yeah, that was my choice, as you probably know if you watched that episode. But yeah, I was wounded by that as well. Now, Rohan, would you mind, with regards to the music choices that are coming up now, if I ran through one after the other with Elliot's quickly, because Elliot's on a time schedule, so and then we can take a bit more time afterwards with your choices.
Go for it. Yeah.
Great. Well, with regards to the first one, Elliot, it's a song to summarise, and like I said, it doesn't have to be a song that specifically that you like or whatever. It's just something that sums up your thoughts overall on the Wenger era for you.
Yeah. I think maybe The Long and Winding Road by the Beatles. A wistful song, a song that has joy to it, a song that has sadness about it, a song that reflects a deep connection, a song that reflects the primacy of the person that it's about. It always leads me back to your door. Like so much of what Arsenal was about Wenger. And I don't know why. That was the first thing that just popped into my head, and I think it fits for me.
Yeah, that's a really good choice. Yeah, it does make a lot of sense. I like to. People really cut it down the half, don't they? The Wenger era and really rubbish the last half of his reign, and I still can't see it like that. Really,
I see it as three thirds personally, or almost 4 quarters.
Yeah, well, even in the worst period, we were still winning 3 FA Cups, and what other club wouldn't give the right arm to win 3 FA Cups, even when they're poor? Do you know what I mean? And there were so many seasons that I think got away from us. Yes, because he didn't drink from the squad enough, and that's down to him as well. Stubbornness. But overall, we had so many serious injuries, season-ending injuries, that completely wrecked us at the wrong time. And there was a lot of bad luck. We were in the title race several times in those latter years. Several times. And it's a shame.
Yeah, I think you can be critical of the last 3 or 4 seasons but in terms of the quality of the football and the performances. Just a lot of things. I think to combine everything post Invincibles as one section is not an accurate reflection. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. And let's move on to his successor, Mr. Unai Emery. Mm-hmm. What would be your song for that? And
I think the song for that would be "Who Let the Dogs Out," because it's as close to the musical distillation of horror as possible. It is the worst thing that exists in the universe. It is terrible. It is regrettable. It is lamentable. And yet it seemed to stick around in the culture for reasons that I could not explain. You find it stuck in your mind when you don't want it there. So for all of the reasons of how horrible it was and yet how persistent it was in remaining in the culture and in your brain, I think Who Let the Dogs Out works for me. Not for any of the significance of the song itself, although you could argue that he let dogs out and they took a giant crap on our pitch. Yeah, I would say in general, Who Let the Dogs Out is a fit for me. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was like at the end, it was like an oozing, weeping sore that just wouldn't heal. It just, it was horrendous, and it just went far. Do you know what though? It was technically still this season that he was in charge.
Well, this season feels like a distant memory at this point.
Well, that's what I was going to say.
Did it happen?
Didn't it feel like 3 or 4 years ago in some respects? I mean, the fact that horrendous Watford game was still this season, just I can't quite get my head around that. It just seems like it was years ago. And I wish, like Rowan, I wish I could just put the whole era out of my head and just pretend it never happened. But I haven't got to that stage yet, unfortunately. Hopefully, with a bit more counselling, I will. But
the amount that he still talks about Arsenal, right? I mean, every other day he's saying something, and now his English seems to have improved, which was the main reason why he couldn't work out, because he couldn't communicate. If he did so much talking when he was in the dressing room, he'd probably still be around. Like, he's just incorrigible, this guy.
Well, I've heard several, even ex-pros, ex-professional footballers say that there's a good coach in there. You don't get to where he is without being a good coach. But I'm convinced that he's not even got any coaching qualifications, and he's just great at interviews. And when he gets in there, he tries to blag it as much as possible by working on formations on Football Manager or something, just to try and get through. And I could see no tactical ability in that guy whatsoever. Even during the long sort of unbeaten run in his first season, I think it was more down to the players than him, if I'm honest. That's the way I feel. I can't see any kind of tactical ability in the guy whatsoever. But there you go. That's just me. It was horrific, and I'm just glad it's over. But it went on far too long. If we'd have got rid of him after the Europa League final, and we started the season with Arteta, it makes me sad to think where we could actually be now. I think we'd be, quite comfortably in the top 4, personally. Yeah. Anyway, let's move on to the era that obviously we're going to have a bit of projection here, but it's how you feel under Mikel Arteta, and what song would sort of best describe your feelings about that, Elliot?
So I lived in Nashville, Tennessee for a period of time. And so I was exposed to some country music and singer-songwriter music. And it's not my favorite genre, but there is a guy named Robert Earl Keen who wrote a song called Feeling Good Again. And it's sort of about a guy who's down on his luck. He's got no money. He's got nothing going for him, but he walks into the bar and he sees some familiar faces and here's a song on the jukebox that he likes. And the line is, "It feels so good, feeling good again." I had $20. I bought everyone around. And it's like feeling good again. You spot some things that look like Arsenal that you remember. You see a guy on the touchline who looks good in the colors and, isn't a hot mess and can speak and inspire you. And, we were down and things aren't particularly good for the club right now, but there's that little moment of just feeling good again and seeing a familiar face and seeing something that looks and feels a little bit like the club. So while you may not be exposed to that genre of music, the sentiment of the song definitely sort of sums up for me how I felt like, because it's not we're back and everything's good, but it's just it's a little it's an oasis. It's a feeling of being able to feel good about Arsenal again after a period where you sort of just felt like the kicking you in the ass.
Yeah, that sounds good. I mean, I was lucky enough to go to Nashville quite a few years ago now. I was 18, believe it or not. That's a long time ago.
Quite a few years ago, I'm guessing.
Yeah, but I went to the Grand Ole Opry at the time, and
yeah,
I enjoyed myself. It was good.
It's a good place to be if you're planning to be single. If you are in a relationship that you consider serious and long term, maybe give it a pass.
Yeah, no, I enjoyed it. I really did, and went on the tour of all the musicians' houses and everything, and it was fun. Went to Gracelands whilst I was there as well.
It's changed a lot, Andrew. I would tell you over the years. It is now famous. It has surpassed Las Vegas as the #1 destination for bachelorette parties. I think you call them hen parties. In the United States, the #1 place for them. So that gives you a sort of sense of what the social scene. Yep, #1.
Wow.
Yep.
Even over and above Las Vegas.
Over Las Vegas. Yeah, just took over Las Vegas for that. Yeah. I don't know how they measure that. I don't know if there's like a National Hen Party, Bachelorette Party Institute of Statistics that takes these measurements. But I can tell you, having been there relatively recently, that it is kind of wild. You go out to any reasonably popular bar at night, and it's a bunch of people with lollipops that are phalluses, trying to get you to participate in whatever silly hen party / bachelorette party game they are engaged in. So yes.
God, that's like any city in the UK on a Saturday, basically. Every week. Oh, normally, anyway.
Well, that's just good. It means a lot of people are getting married, so good for them. Happy people.
Well, I don't know about good for them, but good luck to them.
Swings around.
Right, the last one is the film to summarise what Arsenal means to you as a whole. And again, I'll just pass it over to you, Elliot, and then obviously we can.
Apologies for
it's the middle of the day for you, and you're supposed to be at work. So
I'm technically working right now. I've had to do a little of it during this, so I apologize for that. But and I will yield the mic after this. But so this is a weird choice, admittedly, but I will explain it. The movie I picked is Dune, the movie Dune, and here's why. I absolutely effing love that movie. And yet at the same time, I recognize that in some ways it is a steaming pile of crap in some parts. It is a B movie in some ways. It has stars. Sting is in the movie in a ridiculous appearance. Toto did the music for it, the legendary band Toto.
Africa, yeah.
Yep, it is. It has a legendary director. It has Kyle MacLachlan in it, the guy who would go on to be in Twin Peaks, which is an incredible show and ultimately movie. Like it is culture. It is culture. And in some ways it is culture that you have to get it to love it. Not everyone's going to love it. And at times it's going to challenge you to be like, oh, they really missed it here. And at times it elevates itself. It goes from ridiculous to sublime and back. It has stars and it has comically weird things about it. And it just, I love the analogy in the sense that like, Arsenal isn't Real Madrid. Arsenal isn't Barcelona. Arsenal isn't Bayern Munich. Arsenal is a club that has elements of it that are absolutely sublime, bits of it that are greatness, that are in the culture forever, and it has parts of it that are ridiculously inept and make you want to pull your hair out and everything in between, but it means so much to me. And that movie, because I watched it with friends when I was living in New York City at the time, and I was right out of college, and we would watch it all the time because we had no money, we couldn't go out, and you'd have some drinks and watch that movie, and it just, so it means something to me, and it's personal, and it has personal meaning. And I recognize that to some people, like, haha, it's a joke. To some people, they think it is elevated art. It has people involved in it that are extraordinary and people involved in it that are terrible. And it just sort of summarizes what I think a football club should be to you, which is very personal, something that is multifaceted in the way you respond to it, and that not everybody can get. Not everybody gets Arsenal. Maybe that wasn't always the case. Maybe Arsenal was the obvious choice at one time, when the Invincibles were going undefeated for a season and Thierry Henry was leading the line, and you had Bergkamp and Pires and Vieira and, Saul Campbell. So, maybe it was the obvious choice. Maybe it was Titanic. Well, Titanic's a bad one, but, it was the blockbuster. It was something that everybody got, everybody enjoyed. But for me, I have to pick something a little more counterculture, and that's why I did.
That's fantastic. Yeah. Do you know, I watched that film at the cinema when it came out.
Okay.
But I haven't actually seen it since.
Well, they've got a new one coming out. So there is a new one coming out. Well, we'll see now with COVID when it happens. It was supposed to be, I think, later this year, early next year. But It is one of those things where people who have approached the work have failed mightily to make it come to life. And I don't know. All I will say, because this is not a film review, but I will just say that any good art, I think, that you connect with, whether it's a sports team or a book or a movie or music, it shouldn't all be one thing. No. It shouldn't all be one thing. And so I picked a movie that for me is complicated and means a lot of things, because Arsenal is that for me as well.
Absolutely perfect. Yeah, it's fantastic. And I love the way you described it as well. And I think it's a great choice.
Shouts.
Absolutely great
Cool.
choice.
Yeah, thanks. Like I said, I'm sorry to monopolize the mic, but if you release me back to my job, I can stay employed, which will allow me to continue to have a computer and a microphone to talk into for our podcast. So that'll be good.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll just very briefly say thank you again for coming on. Really appreciated it. Thoroughly enjoyed it. And I really would like to say on behalf of everyone else, and I know it's been said before, you're doing a great job on your Arsenal Vision podcast.
Thanks,
if
man.
anyone's not listening to it, which I highly doubt, but definitely get yourselves on there.
We just released like almost 2 hours on KSE on Stan, and at the beginning we had Giant Gooner on. He did the financial breakdown, then we had the whole panel on. So that's what's out there now if you haven't heard it yet.
Yeah, definitely highly recommend it. I've already listened to that. It's a fantastic episode. And congratulations on your fantastic effort on the raising money for the Arsenal Foundation.
That was awesome, wasn't it? Yeah.
We spoke off air before. I am going to be making a donation to that, because I think it's a fantastic cause. You've done amazing work.
Going to have someone knocking on your door, Andrew.
Yeah. Well, no,
got a guy outside your house.
I'll welcome him in with our open arms.
The funny thing about that, just real quick, Andrew, is we debated internally about that fundraiser. I was thinking about saying we're going to shoot for 1 month. We're going to raise £10,000 for this great charity. We're going to do it in a month. And I said, I'm not going to put a time limit on it, just in case, if it's 45 days, if it doesn't happen, I don't want people to say, your fundraiser failed. And it took a week. Everyone did it in a week, which is incredible to me.
I was just about to say, it just shows you how kind, warm, generous the whole Gooner family are.
Yeah, amazing.
We look after each other, and I really wish it stayed that way all the time. But there's too many fractions in our fan base for my liking. But it just shows you when the times are tough, we come together and we can do anything we want, really. And I hope it continues in that way after this crazy crisis we're going through at the moment globally.
Well said.
But congratulations again. Thank you ever so much for coming on, and I hope to see you again soon, Elliot.
You certainly will. It's my pleasure, Andrew. And Rohan, it's great to meet you. I don't think we chatted before, but I enjoyed it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I wanted to say it's great to interact with you, because I've heard your podcast, but it's the first time that we're interacting, so it's great to sort of be in touch. And
agreed. I know you're in New York and doing the law thing, so you're if you ever want to be talked out of that, just give me a call and I can give you all the reasons to not stick with it.
We'll be in touch.
Cheers, guys.
Thanks, Elliot. Take care. Right, Rowan, I do appreciate that, and thank you for your understanding.
Sure.
He only had a certain amount of time, so it's great that we can actually take our time now, and haven't got to rush too much.
Sure. It's actually the middle of my workday as well. But what I did was, because we spoke about 2 weeks ago, what I did was I put a calendar invite for myself, so which shows I'm blocked for between 2 and 4 here. Great. So I get foresight. No call.
Yeah, well done. But Elliot works for himself, and he said he's snowed under at the moment. So I'm just glad that we got him on anyway, and had the chance to have a chat to him. But right, we move on to your first music choice song, which is the choice for the Wenger era, and what that sort of means to you, encapsulated in a song. So what have you gone for?
So the Wenger era, and again, we can say that it's split into two. It's it was success in the first part, but and some people would say it's failure on the second part. But what I see is more than failure. There's a story of loyalty there. There's a story of perseverance there. There's a story of dedication there. There was a time when he was wanted by the biggest clubs. He was wanted by the Real Madrids and Bayern Munichs, and he had to stay, and he decided to stay. That part. And then what's important is, and I'm happy that Cesc Fabregas brought it out in that interview with Us Blog, which was that people think that he had more control than he actually did. That's what he said in one part of it. And the way I
Yeah.
read it is, and he said it himself in one of the things, that if you go out one night with me, you will see that I do like to spend money. So it's not like, the buck couldn't stop with him. And people, I feel like the agenda was misplaced, because he wasn't the sole problem. He was just an employee of the club, right? If he's been given that job and he's been given that money, although I don't think he's doing it, he did it for the money, but any of us, if we got that opportunity, we would take that opportunity. And it is for my boss to tell me you're not good enough. And if the bosses let me continue, it's their fault. It's not my fault anymore, right?
Yeah.
So that's how I feel about it. And an analogy I'd made earlier in another podcast was that, for me, I see him as the mother who doesn't want to leave the child being the team and the fans, with the alcoholic dad, and the alcoholic dad are the owners and Gazides and all of these guys who are going to ruin the club if he goes. So he says that my time is done, but I can't leave, because if I leave, everything's going to go to shit,
Yeah, but-
so that's my feeling about Wenger in a nutshell. And if it was a movie, then it would be Dead Poet Society. He is the teacher, he's the guide, he's who's taking us forward. I trust what he would say. He was the face of it. In the AGMs, there was no need for the coach or the manager to organize and to be the face of it, but he still did, because he knew that the alcoholic dad couldn't get himself out of bed and actually come and address the children, right? Like, so
Yeah.
that. But if it's the song, then I think it's Nothing Else Matters by Metallica,
Oh, yeah.
in
Great
which
choice.
it says that, so close no matter how far, in terms of the titles, in terms of, if we say between 2005 2014, there wasn't success, but we went to the Champions League final, we went to an FA Cup final, and we went to a League Cup final, which
And we were in a lot of the title races until
Exactly.
the last 10 games.
exactly. So many times in the title race as well. So all of this together, so close no matter how far, couldn't be much more from the heart. Forever trust in who we are,
Yeah.
and nothing else matters.
Great song.
And yeah. So and then the fact that I trust what he had said, and for a lot of people, it would be that he's lied to us, and but he's also an employee, right? But he's tried to be fair, and I don't think he's done anything for personal gain. If I look at it, the way he left the club was in better shape in terms of the squad than what Ferguson left. Although he'd won the title, he, in his last season, bought a Van Persie who was at the sort of end of his career, gonna be injured. But to win the title, he bought him instead of refreshing his center backs,
Yeah.
instead of getting a new midfield, things like that. But Wenger didn't do that. His criticism is that he didn't buy the league, which he could have done. And I do understand that, but that's not
Well,
the
I mean,
story.
what would we give now to be able to finish in the top four? 18, well, no, it was 20 seasons
20
out
seasons.
of 22, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And sometimes our squad was completely in tatters with regards to injuries, etc. And we had to set the last few years. I think what was frustrating was selling one of our best players every year, or one or two of our best players every year at one stage, and not replacing them sufficiently. And every single season, we know, and everyone knew across the world, that we needed to strengthen the defensive midfield and the central defence, and he never did. Now, what I can't wait to actually read is his book that comes out in October, because I still can't quite get past the fact that I think that so much of it in his tenure, especially after the Emirates move, I think that he was I get the feeling he was shielding so much and taking so much on his own back just to save the reputation of the club and the board. And I think a lot of that hopefully will come out. And yeah, Tony Turner watching now says the same. Hopefully Wenger reveals some interesting bits in his book. And I really hope so. But the fear I've got of that is that he's such a gentleman, he's such an
Yeah,
honourable guy that he might
exactly.
still not fully reveal all. But I hope that's not the case, because there's no one that just he literally gave his entire life to Arsenal
Yeah,
throughout his tenure there. Nothing else mattered to him, which is a great link to your song choice. Basically, I don't think anything mattered to
exactly.
him apart from Arsenal, and I think he missed out on an awful lot of his life, which he gave to the club. So yeah, I can't think of anything bad about Wenger, and I do love the guy, and uh, it was sad the way that things went in the end, unfortunately. But yeah, it's a great choice.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Again, so many times so close, and that, there are so many things that we'd want to know. What happened in so many seasons, what has happened, what is going on, but it would be absolutely out of character. I've already pre-ordered it, but I'm not expecting any sensational reveals in that. He's not the Roy Keane sort of character who's going to come out with something sensational and badmouth the club, or even indicated that way. I don't think he would. It would be very out of character, although I would love him to,
I,
but I don't think he's going
hopefully,
to do that.
hopefully he will release all of the information, but do it in a lovely way, like a very
Yeah,
gentlemanly, honourable way, and not slag
exactly.
people off, but just do it in a great, nice way. Fingers crossed.
Exactly. He's given his whole life, and then at the end, what did he get? He got hate from the fans. He got booed out of the stadium, and then he eventually lost the job. Although everybody would say that he stepped down, and that's what I would like to believe. But
No,
that
I don't
wasn't the
think he did.
case. There were seats that were empty, and the board took him as
Well,
the scapegoat, and they took him out.
I've said this before, but it's no coincidence that he left in the summer of 2018, and that summer was the summer that Stan Kroenke got full control of
100.
Arsenal,
Yeah.
100%. And I don't think there's any coincidence that he got rid of him as soon as he got 100% ownership of the club. That's
I
my own
think
personal
I think
opinion.
it was more than 100%. It was the fact that now there were empty seats, and that is something that would hurt this guy, because he wanted the money, and he just couldn't stand it. But again, that's a story of when you dedicate your whole life to that, and then you get nothing in return. This is what I posted one time on Twitter. I don't know if there's a make a wish foundation which can help my thing come true, but I really wish, and this is one of my hopes for my life, that I could spend one day with
Yeah.
Wenger
Oh, me
and talk
too.
to him, and just basically ask him, candid. I've got no wires. I promise that I will never reveal, but I want to know what has happened. Tell me your side of the story, because I want to know. I growing up, I didn't meet my grandfather, but he seems like the grandfather I would have wanted to have. That sort of a person. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
I totally agree, and I would love to spend some time with him. And I was listening to a podcast once, and one of the guys who was a guest on the podcast paid. It was one of the raffle things, and they paid for an hour lunch with Wenger. He could take one friend as well, and he turned up, and apparently he was just absolutely delighted. He spent not just the hour; they ended up spending about 4 hours together. He was in no rush, and he was completely open apparently. And but regrettably, the guy who had paid this and won it in the raffle didn't give anything away. He said, "There's absolutely no way that I would tell any stories, because I promised him it would all be completely private, and I would never disclose it, and to his credit, he didn't.
And I respect
But
that.
imagine what he's walking around with, all this knowledge in his head, and no one else knows. I'd love to know that. I'd love to know, and just ask him so many searching questions in a conversation. I'd love nothing more.
At the end of the 22 years, it's such a situation that he doesn't want to come back and watch the club in the stadium that he's helped build. Like, that what could be a bigger disgrace to the club than that? Ferguson turns up in every game, and Wenger has not come since.
You're not telling me that he hasn't had offers either to manage clubs after he left.
He probably has.
No one could convince me that he hasn't had offers coming out of his ears. And I don't genuinely think that he could put his heart and soul into running another club, manage another club. I think his heart's broken.
Yeah.
Personally.
Let's
move on to the Unai Emery era, and what song encapsulates that for you?
So Emery being trash, I had to pick a song which was, from the 90s, early 2000s, and again, not the best music, but it's Bye 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 by NSYNC. So if you may hate me, but it ain't no lie, baby. Bye bye bye. Because he just can't stop talking about Arsenal, and it pisses me off. Like, he is the antithesis of Arsenal, of Arsene, like what we just spoke about. He is band-mouthing the club non-stop, and he's coming up with random excuses. This guy needs a doctor. Seriously.
Yeah, I know. He's literally doing my head in. I wish he'd just go away, but he keeps popping up because he's trying to cover his own arse, isn't he? And wants another job.
But he seems like such a petty guy, and he seems like he's a guy who was not in control, right? Like, his interview is like, the club didn't back me, the fans sold me out, they did this, they did that. When I was in PSG, the president used to support me. When I was somewhere else, the owner used to support me. Like, you're showing like you didn't have control.
No, listen, he was the head coach. He had no choice over the players whatsoever, and he literally took the job on that basis. He knew that, and that's the reason why he went in there with that so-called dossier of all of our players, and saying that he could get the best out of the players that we had, and he could work with those players. Now, that he didn't come in as a manager. He came in as a head coach to coach the players that we've got and the players that he's given. So the fact that he keeps coming out with all this bullshit about Wilfried Zaha is doing my head in, because we couldn't afford Wilfried Zaha. We couldn't afford him. We'd have to pay the whole lot in one go, which is no chance whatsoever. 80 million quid. We went for Pepe because we could pay in instalments, and they actually wanted us to pay in instalments, Lille, because of they were under so much difficulties financially. They had to guarantee so much money over a certain period of time, so they actually wanted the payment in instalments, which helped us as well. So there's no chance we're going to get Wilfried Zaha. But at the end of the day, it's not his choice anyway. He couldn't go out and choose players because he's not his job.
And even if now he says, Wilfried Zaha, tore us apart, he was such a great player, etc., etc. And what happened in the Crystal Palace game, which was the season-defining game last season? He put out a weak squad. If you're playing against such a guy, why did you pick? This guy has no logic, he's just mumbling stuff, and he's just bringing out stuff just to be relevant. And I've had enough of this guy. It's when he came in. You remember, like, he used to make changes at halftime, and they would turn up.
People were praising that, but he was putting right his mistakes.
Exactly. So initially, I felt like, because Wenger always used to wait till the 65th, 70th minute to make that change. So we've got someone who's proactive. But then later, I was like, wait, why doesn't he choose the right playing 11?
I know, exactly. It's just common sense. Lucas Torreira is not the new Eden Hazard. And he just played game after game after game, playing him in the number 10 role. Just wake up. He's not a number 10.
It's
Oh my God!
and
Anyway,
I understand the logic, because because he wants to win the ball upfield, but you need to have a defensive midfielder also for that. If he
and we
had
had
two
no one
defensive
else. Exactly.
midfielders, then
Yeah.
he's the only specialist that you have, and you've played him there. And again, he was the antithesis of Wenger, because Wenger's one of his faults was that he trusted the team so much that he wouldn't care who he was playing against, be it Barcelona, Bayern Munich, or whoever. And this guy would always think about the opposition and never think about themselves, which is why we were so boring, right? Like, we were thinking about how Bournemouth is going to play or Burnley is going to play. Come on, we can go up against them with all due respect. We can turn up, and they should be worried about us than the other way around.
It was so frustrating, wasn't it? And like I said earlier, I can't believe that it was still classed as this season that he was at our club. And the problem is at the end, and I said this a lot on Twitter, that it got to the stage that we couldn't blame him anymore. He was clearly the wrong guy, and he was just going deeper and deeper into the quicksand. Look, at the end, after that Europa League game, all that was left of him was his little hand or his fingers just sort of slipping down under the quicksand. And
Yeah,
what really scares me in lots of ways was that he was going to be given a new contract by little
Raul.
Danny DeVito lookalike, who's in charge of our club now. That really worries me because I don't. I mean that. Why the hell in anyone with the right mind would even be thinking that? After the Europa League final, I just don't get it at all.
And it was a string of performances even before that, right? We were on a downward
Horrendous.
spiral since about game week 32.
Yeah.
And there's that's the level that he had fallen, because this season started off, and I really thought at the beginning of the season that per our squad we were the third best squad in the country. That's what I
Yeah.
genuinely thought, because Chelsea had a transfer ban. United didn't really. They had Ole, so whom I thought were like, he's not good enough. Tottenham were pretty shit at the beginning of the season, so we were like, I really thought that we could be third. Then
We should have been third though.
yeah, and
It was in
then
our hands, wasn't it?
exactly, and then start the Liverpool game, which was the third game. We got absolutely bombarded, and then he tried to not lose. His main ambition was not to lose rather than to win, which is why we turned out so boring. And how this whole thing shifted was that I started with being angry at him, but then I remember after the Brighton game, I said that I feel bad for him. Somebody put him out of his misery. He's clearly like
Yeah.
in a position that he doesn't know where he is right now.
No.
He's been knocked out so many times.
It was like a racehorse who broke his leg on the racing track, and someone had to come up to him and put a bullet through his head just to put him out of his misery, because that's the way he was. And if you did, I mean, going back to my early podcast, I think it was after the Liverpool game, I started saying right at that point that there's something wrong, and that was only his third game in charge. But
Yeah.
I've said it 100 times. I won't go through it all again, but I was never taken with him from day one when he was actually appointed, and I had my reservations right from the start. And for me, it was like picking a scab every match that we played. It was just trying to get rid of a scab,
Yeah.
and it just took a long time
That's
to go.
That's why for me it's bye.
Yeah, good choice. Now, what about your thoughts on the Arteta era? What would you choose for that?
So Arteta, when there was talk about who's going to replace Emery, and my picks were Allegri, or I even thought Pochettino for that reason. But when people said Arteta, I'll be honest, I wasn't really convinced, because I mean, he doesn't have any managerial experience before this, right? Except for being being second in line to Pep. But with his first interview, he sort of won me over with, like, he said the right things, and communication was the issue with Emery, and communication is a good point for Arteta because he says the right things, and you can see that he means it. He sees the
Yeah.
club with a lot of pride. He sees it with a lot of respect, and you can basically understand that he just values the club. So I want him to do well. So one song for me is, now I want him to do well, I want him to be here for long. So it's Don't Let Me Down by Chainsmokers. That's the one for me, that
Yeah.
now go on. I need you right now, don't let me down.
Yeah, that's a great choice. Yeah, I do. I mean, I take it you watched the video where Ian Wright gave him a phone call recently, and you just genuinely believe everything that he's saying, don't you? I mean, it's quite
Yeah.
easy to do, and because he's so sincere with everything he says. But I don't. I was never. I mean, I'll lie if I wasn't concerned when he initially got the job. Until I saw his first interview, and I was converted after that. But it shouldn't matter that he hasn't been a manager anymore, because again, like I said, with regards to Unai Emery, he's the head coach. He's not a manager. So all he's got to do is coach the team of players that he's got and get the best out of them. And that's, at the end of the day, that's all he's got to do at the moment, and get us as high up the table as he can. And he's been doing a great job and showing us that the players that he's got at his disposal, although they're not going to be, at the moment, good enough to win any kind of leagues or any big competitions, he's showing us that they are a decent team after all. And
what I'm happy about is the fact that he has got this time to assess the team, because if he was appointed in the summer, I think he would have spent a lot of time just figuring out what the characters are in the team, right? And now he's got half the season that he's played, and a set of matches still to go if they do happen. And he can assess and then accordingly decide who needs to go, who needs to stay. And this is a good thing. And I've been enthused with the way that he's sort of brought some energy back to the club, and he's going to make mistakes. The reason why I wasn't convinced is because the Premier League has the best managers in the world right now. If you look at it, you've got Pep Guardiola, Jose Mourinho. No, Jose Mourinho is not one of the best. Jurgen Klopp and and a few others. Santo at Wolves, and Chris Wilder. All of these are quality managers, and to compete with them, it's not always the legacy that you have had as a player, but rather because Ole, in my opinion, is not a great manager, and United are doing us a favor by keeping him in charge. Every time he goes through a few losses, I hope that he wins, so that they keep him.
Me too, exactly the same. Tony Turner's put a couple of comments on as well, saying that Emery has no balls. It's why he kept flip flopping on the lineups completely. He definitely lost his bottle, didn't he? Big time after a little while. And we were sitting third 6 weeks in on October the 5th. People wanted him out in the September international break. See, that's exactly what I mean. We had third in our hands, and he somehow just completely blew it against teams that were in very poor form at the time. And I just don't know. I mean, that's harder to do than to win those games. I think it was harder for Arsenal to go into those matches and lose them than it was to win. But I don't know how he did it, but he did. And crazy. Absolutely crazy. So, what is the choice of film that would best summarise how Arsenal mean to you in your life?
Okay, so again, like, in terms of just the title of the movie, I go with Crazy Stupid Love, right? Like, because out of all all the illogical and irrational things that I do, and generally I'm a reasonable guy, I would like to believe that, right? Like, and out of all the irrational things that I do, following Arsenal is the most irrational thing, because there's no reason to do that, at least in the last whatever time. There's just been so much pain that been associated with it, right? Like there's been sets of times when we've done well, like sets of games, but overall we haven't like really seen the output what we give to the club in terms of being fans and in terms of being loyal supporters. So that, but that's not my choice. My choice of movie is 51st Dates, because every time I go in, like, I don't remember the last time, and basically I go in again and I have all that hope and I fall in love again, and then they sort of let me down, and then I go again, and it's sort of like a zombie situation. But
that's a fantastic
I keep
choice.
going. Yeah, so that's my choice. That's my love for.
I've had some good choices tonight, and I think that's a really really good one actually, because it's true, isn't it? Every time a new match comes round, your hope just is back to normal again. It's like a computer game where your energy bar is getting a bit low, and you have a crappy result at the end, one weekend, and your energy bar is right down there, and then gradually during the week it's gone back up again, and you're good to go. And and I think it's a really good choice, because you just blindly have this optimism that you don't know where it comes from, but especially when a new season starts and everyone's starting again from scratch, and you think you've got all your hopes again and dreams and I think that at the end of the day, there's only one team that can win the league every year, and I don't always think it's the best team that wins the league. In some cases, not so much lately, because it's literally shown that you can buy the league if you've got the right owner who's willing to do so. But back in a few years ago, that sometimes you've got, I don't know how to explain it, but you've got the perfect blend at the right time. Actually, the Leicester campaign is perfect to explain it, because it's almost like all the moons aligned for Leicester, but they bought the right players. And let's face it, when you buy players, it's always a gamble. They bought Jamie Vardy from Fleetwood Town. I mean, they didn't know how he was going to take to the Premier League. Riyad Mahrez. And how many times have you had players like Riyad Mahrez come into the league and fail completely? And they're gone after, even a few months. You don't see him ever again. But he happened to work perfectly. And all within this cog, they had Kante, who again was unproven at the time, and everything just worked like a well-oiled machine. And it doesn't always work like that, and they didn't have any major injuries at all that season, and it just worked. Everything just worked. Everything clicked, and every player as well has got to be in form at the same time. And it's not very often that happens. You can have great players who just have dips in form, and the other teammates around them they're in form, but some of them aren't, and things don't just quite click. And I think sometimes you just have to have everything, all the stars aligned and all the moons aligned, and it just works. And you can win the league if you just have that little bit of luck. And I think there's been so many occasions where we haven't had that luck throughout the years. And we could have bought, for example, say Martinelli. Who would have known how well he would have taken to the league? And Guendouzi, he might have been even better than he was, but hasn't quite worked out that way. But I mean, next season, with another year under their belts, a bit more maturity and a bit more time to be coached by someone as good as Mikel Arteta, you never know. All our stars might align, and even though they're young, our youngsters could all of a sudden just click, because they've been together for several years. Like our academy players, for example, everything just could just go like clockwork. You never know, do you? It's one of those things.
It's difficult to think, right? Like in terms of Huth and Morgan, the defensive duo. More often than not, they'll be like a second half, like mid-table to lower relegation battling pairing, and they won the league.
I know.
We beat them twice in that season, and
Yeah.
the issue was that all of the other teams, and they played the same thing. They played a 4-4-2, and they played on the counter, but for some reason every time all of the teams just were surprised that they were putting balls over the top and Jamie Vardy was running into it. Like
I know.
the other teams did not do their job, and that was the last time I genuinely felt, 14th of February, when we played Leicester, Danny Welbeck scored, and I called up my friend and I told him we're going to win the league.
Yeah.
That was the time. And then Olivier Giroud, the greatest player of all time, goes on a goal drought, right? Like, so
16. I don't think he scored for after January. I think his next goal after January was May.
Yes. And so it was just so bad. And I definitely agree. A lot of things need to go in your favor. For example, this season, Liverpool's a great team, right? They've done really well, but they're not 25 points better than City.
No,
they're not
a
25 points better than City.
That's what I mean.
They could be 5 points better than City, but they're not 25 points better than City. But City's had a lot of injuries. They've had no injuries. They've had VAR going in for them. Everything that matters.
Laporte was missing for a big part of the season. That's exactly what I mean.
Sane.
And if you put at the beginning of the season and you put the two squads together, you'd say that Man City would probably shade it again.
Yeah.
Because if you look at all the individual players of Liverpool, especially their midfield, they're not all world-class players. It's just that they happen to buy and have the right players who all gel together perfectly, and they haven't really had hardly any injuries, have they, either?
No.
So it's just like, it's one of those times where they've just taken some chances on some purchases and it's all worked out. It might not have done, because they bought Sadio Mane from Southampton. At the time, he was a good, talented player. And I don't think he'd scored more than about maybe 12, 15 goals a season at that point. How would they... I mean, look at Salah, who was a complete abject failure at Chelsea.
Chelsea flop.
They took a chance on him. Who would have known that he would have scored 40 goals the next season? It's just pure chance in lots of ways. It's a gamble. And it's all worked off. It's all paid off.
They've got two fullbacks whose crossing is as good as Kevin De Bruyne's. Like, they've got two Kevin De Bruyne's playing there. And who would have thought Robertson from relegated Hull and Trent Alexander from there?
It's a gamble, isn't it? Complete gamble. And that's exactly what I mean by all the stars aligning, that it's worked out for them. And it doesn't... So often it doesn't work that way. And the first time in 30 years that they were going to win the league, and this is... I mean, that was so funny. Anyway, they were chances, they were gambles, and they all paid off. Every player that they bought recently has paid off. And they went through so many years where it didn't.
Yeah.
So... everything goes in cycles, and I just hope that our chance and our time... Because you know what? One interesting thing is, if this coronavirus, and I said this on, I don't know if it was last week or the week before, means that a lot of squads and a lot of teams have to rely on their academy players, because of they just physically can't go out and buy players for quite a while. So if you have to rely on your youth, we're going to be right up there, because our youth prospects are fantastic at the moment.
Yeah.
In a way, I wish that would happen. That teams were almost forced to play the players, the young players. But I still can't see it happening. I still think that there's going to be some crazy transfers done, unfortunately, even in this mad time that we're living in. Because Newcastle... no one's going to tell me that they ain't going to go out and spend massive amounts of money. And same as all the usual suspects out there every year. Hello, Ray from Arsenal Fan Circle. Thanks for watching. He said hello to both of us.
Hi, Ray. So,
So what do you
so,
think?
so
What are your
I,
thoughts on
I,
that?
I think that this time, first of all, we'll have to see how the season progresses and ends, right? Like whether they're going to play all of these games. I do think they're going to play all of them because the Premier League are greedy sharks and they will not let go of that television money, right? Like, so we will play that come whatever may. So the teams will recoup some money. They will incur some losses, but recoup some money versus if they were not playing. Now, what I've said is that we should wait and watch because although this is a dire situation and a situation that has left everyone economically hurting, but this may be a golden opportunity to get some really good purchases in. When the market is down, that's when you go and buy, right? Like that's the basic understanding of buying shares. And in the same way,
Absolutely.
these players are assets. The players who were 40 million earlier could be worth 20 million now. 20 million could be the new 40 million. And we just need to be vigilant because there will be clubs who will be in worse off positions than we are because we at least been run as a decent club, although we're facing losses for some time now. But that's what I had said on Ray's podcast as well, and that 40 million could it could be the new 80 million, and getting those purchases in, having your setup. I think we're about 3 players away from being a decent team. We need a competition at right back, we need a decent center back in addition to Saliba, and we need a defensive midfielder, defensive slash number 8 as well, to replace Shaka, so like a Santi type player. And if we have that, we could go ahead and do something.
I That's exactly what I thought initially, and it's exactly what I hope. But all it will take though is one team to go out there and be stupid, like in Newcastle, like PSG, like Man City, like Liverpool, like Man United, especially Man United, who I think will still go out and spend a lot of money. All it will take is for one of those teams to splash the cash on one big player, and I think it could be Man United buying Jadon Sancho, and I think that might happen. And if they go and do that, that will just be the catalyst of all the other teams trying to play catch up again, and they won't want to lose out. They won't want to lose ground.
So I've
So
I've heard this argument, and I think that, see, a value of a player. So I don't think any player as such is worth 100 million or two
no
hundred
player
million or
is.
whatever.
No
They
player
they
is.
they. They are prime athletes, but they're not saving lives. They're playing football, right? They're kicking a ball, so they're not worth 100 million, 200 million, whatever. So their value is only what a club is willing to pay for them. Now, if
Absolutely.
most of the clubs, because let's say United will buy a couple of players, Newcastle will buy, City might buy, but City with FFP might not buy. But let's say 3-4 teams buy, but the rest of the teams also need to get some money from somewhere. And if the
I
other
totally
teams
agree.
aren't buying, then they'll have to sell for less.
That'll be the next level down, though, in my opinion. And I really hope you're right, Rowan, and I completely hope you're right, honestly. But I think at the top table, if one of those teams, like United, goes and buys a Sancho because they want to steal a march on their rivals, some of the rest, the tier of players slightly below, I think they will probably be very good bargains to be had, but they
Yeah.
won't be like the top quality players. I do think the 40 million, 30 million players will go for half of what they used to be. But when you're talking about the players that can make a difference, like that will really help you win a league, I still think they're going to be stupid money, unfortunately, and it makes me quite sad to think about that in this current climate. But I don't think that a certain level of clubs are going to change too much, and then because of the owners that they have, I just don't think they will. And when you're Newcastle and you've got twice as much money as the owners of Man City, then they're going to want to make a massive statement, and especially as well. And I can see them as soon as they can. They'll probably get rid of Steve Bruce. Obviously,
Yeah,
get like
sure.
either Pochettino in or someone like that, and they're going to go set about, because don't forget the FFP rules are going to be relaxed because of all that's
Yeah.
happening in the world, and they're going to take advantage of that. And when you do initially take over a club, you do have that window where you can invest in the team legally anyway, and it doesn't contravene FFP full stop. So if Newcastle then go and buy I don't know, you name a player, even someone like Mbappe, for example,
Mhm.
if they want to make a statement to say, all right, we're here now, they could literally go out and spend £200 million on Kylian Mbappe. What do you think that all the other clubs, like a City and United, what do you think they're going to do then? They're going to sit back and watch and just simply be overtaken. They're going to still want to be the top dog. So they
Yeah.
will start competing with Newcastle, and it will all start again amongst those top echelon of clubs. Not for everyone else, not for Arsenal, but they will compete against each other like they always have done, unfortunately. That's what I believe.
The good thing is that we've named three positions, right? Three positions: right back, center back, and
See,
midfield. These are not positions that generally go out for mega $1 million, except for like Van Dijk. You could say yes, has gone for that, but we don't need a striker or a winger who would command
well, yeah,
that
it
sort of money.
depends. It depends about what's going to happen with
Aubameyang.
Aubameyang. Yeah.
So that on that I have my feelings. If you're getting under 40-45 million, then you just keep him, because he can probably fire you into the Champions League,
I
and there's no
totally agree.
point, you'll
Yeah.
recoup it. Because buying a Timo Werner, buying somebody else like that is going to cost you 100 million again. So there's no point in letting him go. He is
Pointless. Yeah.
essential for us competing and getting into the Champions League, and we can recoup his money. But if somebody is willing to spend 60, 70, 80 million on him, then I'm sure that the club would want to sell. But in terms of our front pairing, like if we keep Aubameyang, and then left side I think is sorted with Martinelli and Saka. Right side we've got Pepe and Nelson. So we've got a decentish front line, and
I
I
think our
don't
front
really.
line is better than a lot of teams.
Yeah.
I think it's extremely strong. And what I don't understand is being linked with Willian on a free because he's free.
That was
Doesn't mean
depressing.
you have to go and get him because he's free. He's still 32 years old, and he's still a good player at the moment. But why would you do that? Why would you commit to a 2 or 3 year contract for someone like him when? And I don't like this player, at all. But we've still actually got Mkhitaryan as a player contracted for another year, and at this stage he's 31 and he's had a decent time over in Rome. But why would you go and get Willian when you've already got a Mkhitaryan under contract? And you might as well keep Mkhitaryan. Willian is a little bit better than Mkhitaryan, I believe. But is he that much better that we'd have to go and sign him and give him a big signing on fee and a big contract, which is undoubtedly would have a big wage packet, when you've already got Mkhitaryan? That doesn't make sense. Also, why would you go and get Ryan Fraser, who had one good season for Bournemouth,
Yeah.
on a free, which were strongly linked to Willian and Ryan Fraser? Then why would we go and get Ryan Fraser when we've got Martinelli and Saka and Aubameyang coming in from the left? Why
There
would we
is
go and get
th-
Ryan
it,
Fraser
it
then?
makes no sense, and that is why it feels so well with this Arsenal board, because they make no sense. It's absolutely
I
absurd. That was the out of all of this lockdown in which people have been stuck at home and you can't really move about and talk to people. The most depressing part of this lockdown was when I heard that there was that Willian link, because it was just come on, like
I mean,
you
it
don't
doesn't
need
make sense. It also puts a big fence in the way of one of our youngsters, like
that.
Emil Smith Rowe. I mean, I'm really excited about Emil Smith Rowe. We've seen an awful lot of our youngsters this season so far, and we've been excited by them all. like Saka and obviously Nelson and Willock, and I really like Willock as well. But Emile Smith Rowe has got the potential to be better than all of those as well, genuinely. And he's purely at Huddersfield at the moment, just to toughen up, really, and to get his match strength and match fitness, because his talent is fantastic. And I'm sure you've probably seen the videos on YouTube of his season so far at Huddersfield. And people will say, "Oh, it's only Huddersfield, or whatever," but he's not there because that's his level. He's there to toughen up and just to get match fitness. And
That's where he
I
will
don't-
get that. But I have another question, and this is a bit different. This is about you know about Liverpool and them. They've had Salah, Mane for a few seasons now, who have done really well, and I would think if Salah and Mane were at Arsenal, they would have been linked to Real Madrid and Barcelona, and we would have been like in no place to sign an extension with them. And the Aubameyang situation right now. Why do you think that's not happening to Liverpool? I haven't read that they've seriously been linked, or Liverpool fear losing them. Although they aren't winning anything, apart from, I mean, they did win the Champions League, but they weren't
apart
winning
from the Champions League.
No,
yeah.
no, no. Of course, of course. So they were there for a bit, but they won that. And with the prospect of City winning, like you said, right? Like at the beginning of the season, I would have thought that when they got 98, 97 points last season and they didn't win the league and they won the Champions League, I thought that they would have said, this is enough. We cannot win the league. We won the Champions League. Now we need to go to Real Madrid or Barcelona. But that didn't happen. Why do you think that doesn't happen and that happens to us?
Because they've got Jurgen Klopp as a manager, and we had Unai Emery as manager, probably. And I think it's down to something as simple as that, because their owners are much more ambitious than our owners. And I think it shows. It shows that we've, unfortunately, over the last decade, have had a big reputation of selling all of our best players. As simple as that. We've sold all of our players that have shown potential, and also the players that we've had, such as Nasri and Adebayor. They purely, as soon as they had one good season, they were off, and they used us to get their move, and we should not have allowed that. And I had a period of, and I've said this before, I've had a period of around 2 or 3 seasons that I almost took no part in whatsoever, because after we sold Robin van Persie to Man United, we sold the league for 25 million quid.
Yeah.
We gave them the league for 25 million quid. And once we'd done that, after, on top of all the other players that we'd sold and got rid of, I was so disillusioned. I hardly watched a game for between 2 and 3 years. I lost of my Arsenal support, because I was just so disillusioned with the whole thing. And that has unfortunately given us that reputation lately of always doing that after we've moved into the Emirates. And what really hits the back of your throat with a terrible, rotten taste is it's completely the opposite of what we were sold. When we moved into the Emirates, we were supposed to be competing and buying the best players and competing for everything, but it's been completely the opposite. And players are only human beings as well, and they're not stupid. They're going to recognise this themselves. And in a lot of cases, having Arsenal on their CV for players like Emmanuel Adebayor was a really promising, and it was a good way of using us for a while, showing what we could do, and to get his move that he wanted at that particular point. Getting a way into the Premier League. And the thought of that and being used like that, like some of these mercenary players that we unfortunately bought, it was very, very low period, unfortunately for me as an Arsenal fan. And I didn't like what I was seeing, because that was not what we were sold. And so it's a long way around of me explaining that the answer to your question really is the reputation that we've gained under the ownership that we've got now, and the choice of manager we made, especially after Wenger left, and the choice that we should have made by getting rid of Wenger, as much as I hate saying that, a couple of seasons before.
Yeah.
We hung on to him a little bit too long. We could have had Klopp ourselves, as we all know.
Yeah.
He was all of us fans wanted him when he was available. We didn't make that move. We weren't ambitious enough. And that, unfortunately, is the answer to your question. We're not, or we haven't been, ambitious enough. And I just sincerely hope that Mikel Arteta, coming into the club now, shows that his ambition will be infectious. And I hope that his relationship with Edu will be a very good, strong partnership for Arsenal for many years to come. And the best possible thing that the club could do is show that they have a little bit of ambition, is replace Raul Sanllehi, because I think that he is the cancer that's eating the club, and the longer he stays in the club, it will make Ivan Gazidis look like Mother Teresa. Unfortunately, we thought we had it bad under Ivan Gazidis. Well, you wait. If we keep hold of Raul Sanllehi, I'm very concerned. He's the biggest problem we've got in the club at the moment. I'd rather have 10 Mustafis and 10 Xhakas in the team every week than have Raul Sanllehi at the club. The sooner people realise that, the better, really. That he is the problem. And the conversations people are having about his relationship with the super agents, trust me, that's going to be just the tip of the iceberg. He's going to make some very bad decisions, and if you don't get that after the fact that he was going to offer Unai Emery a contract extension for 3 years after the Europa League final, then you never will realise that, unfortunately.
I think you've made like really good points on these, and I tend to agree, and that's what I thought, and maybe that's the reason why a Real Madrid or a Barcelona come after our players. But if we see more recently, Liverpool has sold Luis Suarez, Coutinho. They've sold, earlier they've sold Mascherano. They've sold a lot of players to or Torres to Chelsea. They've sold a lot of players. So I think it's about the intent that these owners have shown since they have come in, and keeping hold of some players, making these buys. There's been a lot of luck on the way as well, but but I would think that Liverpool has made more big level sells than Arsenal has in the past few years.
Yeah, but they've what they did was they identified the players that they really needed, didn't they? They identified their goalkeeper. They identified that centre back that they actually wanted, and they didn't just jump in immediately. They waited until they did, because what we would have done is, and I think a lot of it also is down to the fan base, unfortunately, being so incredibly impatient and demanding that we make that signing there and then. But for example, with Van Dijk, they had to wait 6 months to get him, and a lot of other clubs would have been panicking too much and would have gone for their second choice because they couldn't get him in the January. So instead of waiting to summer, they would have gone for a second-rate Van Dijk, and that's what we did. We could have had Van Dijk as well when he was at Celtic, but we went and bought Mustafi for 3 times the amount. But instead, Van Dijk went to Southampton, and then obviously, to Liverpool, and the rest is history. We went and bought Mustafi, unfortunately, and I mean it's almost comical, really, isn't it? But they've actually got the players that they wanted. They've spent massive on the exact right player, rather than go out and buy. Instead of spending say 55 million quid on one player, we'll go out and buy 3 players for 15 million. And it's much, much more of a gamble, and it hasn't paid off for us. We've made some good purchases lately. It seems to be going a little bit back up, but for a whole period of time, we were making some terrible, terrible decisions, and we weren't spending the money properly, and we weren't selling properly for quite a long period of time either. We've done stupid mistakes like letting Ramsey go for free when we could have quite clearly got 40, 50 million quid for Ramsey.
For
But we
Wilshire.
didn't. We didn't make the right. Wilshire's another one, yeah. And I'd say probably around. I'd say about 10 years, maybe give or take, of terrible decisions in the transfer market, and that is the big mistake. Whereby they've got the right decision makers in place. We've got Raul now. I can't remember the guy's name now at Liverpool, but they've got the right guy in charge who's making the right decisions. We own a stats company. We went out and bought a stats company. We don't use them anymore. They're still there, but we've got Raul Sanyehi with chinwagging over a glass of brandy with all the super agents instead.
And that's why we get Luis, right? Because they that's why we get Cedric Suarez, right? Because when you get into bed with the super agents, they've got a list of clients and they want to sell. And Arsenal, being in this desperate situation, will not get a Varane. We'll get like a
We'll get Willian.
Suarez. Yeah, we'll get a Willian.
I know, because of the age. Oh, I don't know actually Willian's agent, but I bet if you go and look, it'll be one of those guys who's in our director's box every week, unfortunately. So the biggest. Do you know who I would like? One of the best signings. I mean, I'd love Thomas Partey. I've been going on about for months and months. I'd love to get Thomas Partey, but if we think we're going to get him now in this marketplace in the current climate, we're fooling ourselves. But the best signing we could possibly make as a club, I think, would be go and get Stuart Webster from Norwich, who is their, I don't know, I think his title is sporting director or football director of football. If you look at some of the young players that they've had over the last few years coming through that club and the intense quality of the young players they've got there now, if we had someone like that who could actually spot players like those, like a James Maddison, like a Max Aarons, like all the other youngsters that they've got coming, very, very exciting players. Their whole ability of finding those players, nurturing them, getting them playing amazing football, and then selling them on. I mean, how much would they get for James Maddison last season from Leicester? I mean, I can't remember how much they paid in the end, but they got him for nothing. Picked him up, and if you've got the right people making the right decisions based on the right, scouting, actual proper old school scouting, as well as the analytics of the player, rather than just the relationships of the guys that you're hanging around with drinking brandy. I mean, that is something we need. And
we had
the guy in Sven Mislintat,
and
we let him go.
Exactly.
And this is what I mean. Raul Sanyehi is the root cause of all of our problems, as far as I'm concerned, making these decisions, and we've left the club in his hands completely. And we need to make a decision sooner rather than later. Unfortunately, I can't see it happening. I think the Cronkies have got. They think they've got the right team in place, and I've got some real worries about it. And I've aired them my concerns before, but not quite to this level. But I think people need to wake up and say that I can see this going on for quite a long time because of that one man. And I tell you what, if Mikel Arteta, we've got the right head coach in place now. I've got so much belief in him, but if he is not backed, someone else is going to go and get him at the end of next season at the latest, because he's already showing how good he is as a coach. I mean, it's no coincidence that Man City's form went off a cliff after he left. I don't believe. I think that shows an awful lot. And if we don't back him in the transfer market and get the right players, then he's going to be one of the big clubs, across Europe. They're going to come in for him and be there. He'll be their head coach rather than us.
I feel like, there are some you need a scouting network, and you need all of this, which we had with Mislintat, and his connections in Germany, that we got Aubameyang. And you don't need any scouting for Aubameyang, but like, he was getting the right structure in place. I felt that was great, and we need that. But what really frustrates me is that so many times we, as fans, can tell that this is the right direction for the club, and we aren't paid millions of dollars to make that decision, but we know logically, we knew for years. I was saying, like, when Van Dijk was at Southampton, get him. And there was a point, even from Southampton, we could have got him for about 40 odd million, and we didn't do that. I was like, get Alderweireld from Southampton. He went to Spurs. Get Klopp in when he was available. Klopp would have he would have been the right fit for Arsenal. He has this feel good aura around him. He plays a good brand of football. The fans would have loved him, and he would have increased the equity. Why I think these guys, the Kroenkes, they're billionaires, but they are shit business people. And I'll tell you why. Is because if I had an asset like Arsenal, I would try to increase its valuation, because increasing its valuation will get me more money at the end of it, which is their end game, right? Now, how do you increase the valuation? By making the team do well on the field, right? And getting to endorsements, and leading your club. But we are going in a downward spiral. Just look at Liverpool. Their stocks have increased 2-3 times since they've got Klopp in. So it's in their interest to invest, and it's not like we're not investing. Since the time that Jurgen Klopp has come in, we've spent around about the same as Liverpool. If you take money out of the picture, we've spent the same, and they're not even counting that they've spent on Coutinho, like they've got from Coutinho sale, etc.,
But
etc.
we haven't sold anywhere near as well as them. We've let players go for. I mean, we sold Wojciech Szczesny for £10 million. I mean, what's that all about?
Yeah.
And absolutely ridiculous. And we sold, for God's sake, what's his name? The other goalkeeper,
Ospina.
Ospina. Yeah, a very experienced, competent international goalkeeper for £3 million. We've got no clue. So, I mean, we let Ramsey go for nothing, and
then we didn't take 30-40 million for Shaka. We didn't take the 10 million for Mickey. No. We aren't taking the money for El Neni. Like, bad decision over bad decision. And, the only people to blame are the people on top.
Exactly. All right, I'm going to have to wind up now. We're going nearly 2 hours. So I'm going to finish off with this question from Ray. Thanks, Ray. If you can make 2 moves, swap or buy, what moves do you make with 40 million maximum combined expenditure? Now, we'll have to give us a fairly quick answer on that one. If you can think of anyone.
Yeah.
I tell you what I would do for the first one. I would swap quite comfortably. I would swap Lacazette for Thomas Partey. Maybe have to top it up by about maybe 10 million quid.
Same. Yeah.
Very happily do that. And you know what as well? Now, this may sound a bit weird, but I don't think we actually need to replace Lacazette.
As long as we keep Aubameyang.
We've got Nketiah. Yeah, we keep Aubameyang.
Yeah.
We could give him a much improved contract because it's still cheaper than buying someone else.
Mm-hmm.
Move him into the middle, and then we've got Saka or Martinelli for the left, Pepe from the right, and Nelson from the right as well. But also, I don't think in my strongest 11, Lacazette's on the bench. I don't think he plays at the moment. And I think that if we need goals, we've got Nketiah, who's a better natural goal scorer than Lacazette. And now that's my. Some people, it's quite fashionable to say, what's your, what's the word? Opinion. Your controversial opinion, unpopular opinion, even.
Unpopular opinion.
I don't think that's an unpopular opinion. I think Nketiah is a better natural goal scorer than Lacazette. Now, Lacazette's got much more to his game than Nketiah at the moment. I'm not stupid. I know that.
Yeah.
But I think that if both players played in very, very similar teams and both started the season, even now, with Nketiah's limited experience, I think that Nketiah would outscore Lacazette. Now, Lacazette might have a better overall contribution to the team, but at the end of the day, when you're paying him as a striker and you buy him as a striker, you want goals. And I think
Goal.
Nketiah will get more goals than him in a good team. But because Lacazette shouldn't really be in our first 11 strongest players, I'd be quite comfortable not to replace Lacazette and keep Nketiah in his place on the bench, because we could spend that money then elsewhere, personally.
Absolutely agree with that. I think that because Lacazette is playing there, we have to shoehorn, him and Aubameyang in the same team, and Aubameyang
Yeah.
gets put left, which I
It
don't
weakens
like.
us. It weakens us.
And then Martinelli and Saka suffer. So overall, I would sell Lacazette for Partey as long as we keep Aubameyang, and I'd be quite happy with it. Unpopular opinion, or I don't think it's as unpopular anymore. But this unpopular comparison maybe that Lacazette has Giroud numbers, right? In terms of goal scoring, he scored 15, 16 goals in his seasons. Even when he was player of the season, he had 16 goals, right? Which is the same number that Giroud had in the Leicester season. So if Lacazette was doing the same thing in that season, people would have been much more angry at him, like they are with Giroud. But he gets away with it because we are nowhere in the title race.
No.
So yeah.
I mean, I don't really, as long as Arteta can get Maitland-Niles' mind right and get him more mentally stable, if you like, regards to his thoughts on playing right back. I think he's a very, very promising right back, but it's all about what's up here in between his ears. And if he can get his head around the fact that if he knuckled down and learnt that position, hopefully he's seen some sense during this downtime, and he's been spending all this time learning the role of right back. If he could do that, then I don't think we need a right back, because between him and Bellerin, I think that's we've got a very good understudy for Bellerin there in Maitland-Niles, and we're very strong at left back. Now we've got Tierney back as well, because obviously Saka can drop back and understudy him as well. But also we've got Kolasinac. I really think I would love to get rid of Kolasinac whilst he's got some kind of value, because he's still at a good age, and I think he's perfect for someone like West Ham. We get rid of all our cast-offs to West Ham, and I think they'd love him bombing up and down the left-hand side. But as regards to two moves, swap or buy, I think that our next most critical role to fill is someone to replace long-term Mesut Ozil, because I would love to have, like I said earlier, Emile Smith-Rowe in the squad week in, week out next season, but he could learn from someone really, really strong coming in, and because we've already got the defensive midfield sorted, and I think as much as we need a central defender, and because with this question we're limited to two moves, as much as we do, I really hope that we make Pablo Mari permanent, because I do like to look at that guy. I'm quite comfortable with him. He reminds me a lot of Steve Bold. You're probably too young to have seen Steve Bold week in, week out, but his style of play is very similar to me, and the way he runs. He's got a funny gait, he's quite similar. But I like to look at that guy, so fingers crossed we can make him permanent. But I think we're more critical to have a link player in, I hate to say it, the Ramsey type role, who can run who could run and pick the ball up and run comfortably and link the midfield and forwards. Question is, who would it be? In an ideal world, it would be someone like Jack Grealish. I do like the guy. He's a very, very competent player, and he's got a lot of strength as well. Or, and I can't think. Can you think of another player who would fit that sort of mould?
So actually, if you ask me, first of all, Ray's gonna love your answer with Murray because he's a big fan of Murray. So
I am.
although we've just
I
seen like
like
two
him.
games of him, so hopefully he does well, and Arteta has that influence. Now with Partey, I'm not really sure about what his actual skill set is because I can't say that I've watched too much of him. I watched him in the Liverpool two legs, and then I've watched some videos of him in on YouTube. But what we need is a Santi type player, right? Like who can what I said before on Ray's podcast is that if the rules of the game were that Shaka gets the ball and for 10 seconds nobody can close him down, if those were the rules of the game, Shaka would be the brilliant player.
Yeah.
But that's not the rule of the game. So he's not, so that's why that is a
Spot on.
that's
Spot
an
on.
odd position. So I don't know if Partey fulfills that position, that role of
Yeah.
spreading.
Actually, I know what I'd do. I mean, again, a lot of people would say this is an unpopular opinion because I've seen a lot of criticism for him. But if we got Partey in, I think the absolute perfect partner in a double pivot with him would be Danny Ceballos. I love Danny Ceballos. I don't see what people. He's not the quickest player in the world. No, we don't need him to be though. This is what I try and explain to everyone. What we need is because one of the best modern day sort of midfielders in the type that we need was Michael Carrick. As much as I don't like Man United, and I hate to say it, he is the type of guy who would be perfect for us at the moment because we need someone, like you said, with the Xhaka in the Xhaka position, who can take the ball from the defence or the goalkeeper and quickly spot that ball that needs to go out, whether that's left, right, centre, straight ahead, long ball to the centre forward. We need someone in that kind of mould. Michael Carrick was slow as a cart horse. He couldn't have any pace, but he was a very, very clever player. And I see that Danny Ceballos is he could be fulfilling that role perfectly because he is very quick-footed. He makes his decisions very quickly, and he just needs because his injury earlier in the season was such a shame because that really stunted his progress. Unfortunately, he was out for 3 months. People forget that, but I think he's got the talent and the desire, and more than anything, the passion as well and love for the club in such a short space of time. He's the sort of player I love watching, and he would fulfil that role perfectly. And Thomas Partey, he hasn't quite got the same height, but he's not far off. I suppose, he's as close as we could possibly get to be this search for a Vieira replacement as we've ever had, because that's the kind of player he is. He's a box-to-box player, and he's got power, pace, and he would scare the living daylights out of a lot of opposition midfielders. And I think with him and Ceballos, they would complement each other really, really well. So if we could have a maximum of £40 million expenditure, I think a Lacazette swap for Thomas Partey, even if we have to give them a bit extra, and with the change, I'd get Ceballos from Real Madrid. Personally, I'd be really happy with that.
Yeah, I mean Partey for me, and then of course, like I don't know if Ceballos wants to stay or if he is the right player. We need somebody who is a quick two-footed player, and I do agree with the pace point of view, right? Like because Toni Kroos is not the fastest player in the world, but he's got that passing range, right?
People seem obsessed that having to have Olympic sprinters in the midfield, and yes, it's great to have pace, but we've got plenty of pace on the wings. Yeah, we've got plenty of pace in the team. We don't need a midfielder who is like Usain Bolt. We need someone who can keep the ball. You know, like a
Yeah.
Ceballos, a Santi. You know, there aren't any Santis around at the moment. People just have to wake up sometimes. There's no one like that. But Ceballos is young. He's only 22 still. Maybe he's just turned 23, I think. I don't know. But he's still very, very young. And he's got plenty of time to learn that role perfectly. And the talent is easy to see for me in that guy, Ceballos. I think he's got oozes talent. You don't play for Real Madrid if you're shit. Or the Spanish national team. So
Yeah.
I'd like to give him a go, and he could be the basis of our midfield for a long time to come. And Thomas Partey's 27, so we would get the best years out of him at the moment if we made that plunge. But yeah, and also like Ray said, like I said earlier, I'd love to make Pablo Marie permanent as well. I hope that we'd have enough money left over for that. But I think that's only about £6 million or something. I can't remember. Something along those lines. So hopefully we'll be able to afford him as well.
Yeah,
So yeah,
that seems like a decent shout.
I'm going to have to sort of finish up there. But I've really enjoyed that, Rohan.
Yeah,
I
it
hope
was
you'll come on again
great,
soon.
right?
Ray,
Yeah.
you must come on soon as well if you are up for it. I'd love to get you on and so you can give me your choices on Mesut Island discs as well. But yeah, thanks ever so much, Rohan. I'm really grateful you came on. Hope to see you again very, very soon.
Yeah,
Thanks everyone for
it was
watching.
absolutely great, and just talking about the whole length of from Wenger to Emery
Yeah.
to Arteta moving forward, like everything. It was great.
It's we've not been short of things to talk about, have we? Even though we haven't kicked a ball for 3 months as a team, so it's been good. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. So thanks ever so much for everyone watching. Thanks to everyone who is listening to this in the audio version, because shortly after this it will be available on all major platforms of Spotify, Apple Podcasts, etc. So make sure you like, subscribe, and if you are listening on Apple Podcasts, please give us a 5-star review because it will help us get found. So we've got some great guests coming up. I'm not going to release the names just yet because the dates are still to be sorted out. But we've got another show coming up next Wednesday. So make sure you subscribe and hit the notification button so you don't forget it. So I'll see you again very soon. Take care. Thank you.